How to structure dialogue. This lesson will help you understand how to set up dialogue primarily for a story or perhaps for an opinion piece. This is not geared for essay writing because in essay writing you shouldn't have dialogue back and forth between different characters in that kind of paper. But if you were to have dialogue, it would be structured the same way. In order to move forward in this lesson, I am going to show you a discussion between Bob and Anne. In this particular structure, you see this glob of language. There's no indents, there's no punctuation. There are words underlined that are words I'd like people to edit out. We'll talk about that later. In order to make this a little bit easier to follow, I have created a structure for different people speaking. So this is one person, this is the next speaker, this is the next speaker, and so on. The first thing to make note of, which is why you don't have multiple speakers having a conversation in an essay, is that every time a speaker changes, you have a new indent. So Anne is a direct address. We're going to put a comma here. I don't want you to go, comma, close that quotation mark. Bob said. We're going to follow that with a period. Then the next bit of something that Bob says is going to start with the quotation mark, capital P, period, and a closing quotation mark at the end. When you are announcing a speaker in between two independent clauses, Bob said is the announcement of the speaker, and it belongs to the clause or the bit of language that precedes it. Now, this is a bit of language that follows. I don't need to say Bob said in regard to the first part of this and then say Bob pleaded after this because it's all part of this same indent, therefore I know it's all Bob. The next element is going to be Anne speaking. So I'm going to indent because we have a new speaker. Anne thought about how much she loves him, but she also considered his flaws. She hesitated for a moment and then said, so we have the announcement of the speaker preceding the dialogue section. You would need to make some changes, comma, okay. Now, this is called a tag. When you have this little itty-bitty question at the end of an independent clause that is a statement, that means we just tagged it on at the end there. The next line is going to be Bob talking. I don't need to say Bob said because I've got an indent here. So it's obviously Bob talking. Bob is asking what kind of changes. So I guess he's thinking about what can he do to make Anne happy. We have Anne talking, so we're going to indent. You can't figure that out, Anne asked. Now that looks like a statement, but because I have Anne asked here, I'm going to go ahead and put a question mark there. Sometimes people make statements, but they phrase it by the tone of the voice as a question. So we have, you can't figure that out, as a question. Now, the next bit is Bob again. So we're going to have another indent. I'll try, semicolon, give me a minute, period. The reason I'm putting a period here is that I'm not following this little segment of conversation with an announcement of the speaker, as in Anne asked or Bob said. I know that this is Bob here because I have a new indent, and this was Anne. So I don't need to say Bob said. Here I have narration. Bob scratched his head and frowned for a full several seconds before saying, so there's the announcement of the speaker. We have a direct address again, so I'm going to put a comma there. Anne, I thought things were good, period. I thought we were good together. And we ended that quote. Now we have a new speaker again. So this is Anne saying, "Don't you see?" Question mark. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Period. And end quotation mark. Now I can have multiple sentences in the same two quotation marks. This is the open quotation mark for everything that was said, and this is the closing quotation mark for everything that was said. Doesn't matter whether it's one sentence, two sentences, or several sentences. All right, so we have Bob talking to Anne here. We have Anne speaking to Bob, and this is Bob answering. So we're going to have another indent because the speaker changed. What are you talking about? We know that Bob is asking because this was Anne and this was Bob. New indent, so we know who's speaking. We have a new speaker here. This is Anne talking, so we're going to have an indent. Going to capitalize that conjunctive adverb and put a comma there. Apparently, you can't even follow a simple conversation. So again, we have a statement that is read like a question because I have asked here at the end. Please do not set up dialogue so that it's what somebody said and then you move the narration away from it. Here I have, "I'll try, give me a minute." Bob scratched his head for a full several seconds before saying, and then I have Bob talking again. Here I have one person talking and one person talking and one person talking, and then a little bit of narration there. I only have the dialogue divided because that's the way the story's set up. But you do not isolate dialogue from paragraphs that the dialogue belongs to. I have a new speaker here, so I'm going to indent. "I could if you would just say what you mean." And then that sentence ends. Bob's heart was pounding. Okay, at this point, I am not announcing the speaker. I don't need to because here Anne was speaking and I have a new indent, so I already know that's Bob speaking. I don't need to announce the speaker. Then I have narration. Bob's heart was pounding and he began to feel frustrated and nervous. He started to pace, and I'm going to put a semicolon there. It calmed him to pace and helped him think. So I have all of this narration is included in the same paragraph as Bob's spoken part. Now, I have a new speaker again, so another indent. I have, "Will you please stop that?" Question mark. Anne asked. Now I'm going to put a period there because Anne asked belongs to the first bit of what it is she's saying. I have more of what she's saying, so I'm going to put another quotation mark there. "You know I hate it when you do that." Period. Closing quotation marks. This is Bob. Poor Bob is trying so hard to figure out what's going on. "Do what?" Question mark. End of quotation mark, closing quotation mark. And I don't need to say "said Bob" because it's obvious. Then we have Anne getting a little frustrated. "That." I'm going to put an exclamation point here because Anne shouted. Anne shouted is the identification of the speaker. The identification of the speaker belongs to the first thing that she or he said. But this person is going to continue to talk. So we're going to say "stop." "Pacing." "Stop. You're driving me crazy." So we have "stop pacing," period, "stop." Maybe I'll even put an exclamation point there. And then we'll have "you're driving me crazy," and ending quotation marks there. Okay, then we have a new speaker again who is saying "I can't pace," period. "I can't read your mind," period. And then Bob asks, "What's the point to our talking?" Then we have the final kiss off here, exactly, comma, and said, and the announcement of the speaker belongs to the first thing that she said. But now we have quickly leaving the room, the door slammed behind her. So quickly leaving the room, I'm going to set aside with a comma. And then I have an independent clause after that, so I'm going to capitalize that T and put a period at the end. This is narration, not talking. Now, the reason that in this practice I have said, shouted, asked, saying, asked, said, underlined is because if I were doing this in class, I would have students look for words to replace these words. There is nothing more tedious in a story than having to read said, saying, all that over and over again. So let's go to my website, elwoodeducation.com, and in the search bar, I'm going to type in the word said, and then we're going to go to better word choices. And you will get a whole bunch of offerings here that will help you learn how to vary your language. We'll just look at one of them. So we're going to look at words to replace said and bring that document up for you to look at. And this looks like this. I'm going to enable editing so that I can put this in a structure that's easier to follow. So we have master list of said, babbled, droned, mused, requested. Over on this page, we have words that denote anger. We have barked and bawled. We have soft words, breathed, crooned. We have questions, proposed, pried, posed, interrogated. So there's all kinds of words to replace said, and there's all kinds of options in here for you to use. So I hope that that was helpful to you, and please use the website for all kinds of resources whenever you feel the need. Thank you for viewing.